All right, welcome. That's a high pitch. Hope you're feeling energized a little bit. So, I'm from IKEA. I'm going to talk a little bit about our transformation journey and how we develop and how we work. But first, how many have bought furniture from us? All right, and hands up if you like the assembly part. Ah, that's good. That's good. That's good. So IKEA, we have a pretty good, strong vision from a furniture point of view, home furnishing, and we want to work with the people, and we want to create furniture and help them in all stages of life. And to support us in this, we have a pretty strong business idea, and that is to create cheap or affordable, good furniture, right? And but I don't know how many associate IKEA with IT and digital. Hands up if you know about our IT department. Right? Keep them up if you have a good positive vibe about IT at IKEA. Right? Some IKEAns, that's good. So I will try to help solve both issues and help you a little bit on that way. So I'm coming from Inca Group, and Inca Group, or if we start with IKEA, it's a franchise company, and Inca Group is the largest franchisee, and we have a lot of the blue stores here in Malmö, for instance. It's run by Inca. We also run IKEA.com and host it, and all the systems underneath that make up this. And we have a pretty strong visitation, both in store and on web. And connected to this, we have been working with IT for a while. So I'll go through a little bit of history first, of where we're coming from and where we're headed in this digital transformation. And I will go way back actually. So we'll start in the 70s. So don't worry, it will be a quick kind of glance in the past. So we got our first computer 68. And in the 70s, it was all about mainframe. It was all about COBOL programming. And we started working with MVS, so multiple virtual storage systems in IBM context and the service there. But it was all very centrally steered. It's very punch card driven. So we had up in Elmhult a lot of guys and mostly women sitting and doing the punch cards things. Super interesting. It's a way back though. Moving over to the next decade, the 80s, we started seeing, okay, we need help with IT. We can't just ask our colleague or our friends with slight interest. We need to create a central kind of help desk at IKEA. So that started in the 80s, actually. And we also started to looking at the next generation of IBM machines, and also the HP Fanium machines with VMS. So our MHS system, which is still in use today, running Pascal, was created in the 80s. So it's a strong legacy and a strong history in that. Moving over then to the fun, happy 90s, where we had more service coming, x86s. We started to see more in-house development of systems. We created our point-to-point integration, which we call IKEA Data Routing System, still in use in some cases today. So you see, what we do lasts for a while, same with our furniture, right? And then moving over from the 90s into the noughties, I couldn't find a better name for it. I think noughties is good, right? So between 2001 and onwards, 2010. We actually started pretty early with the whole SUA experience. We kind of did it right, but not quite. So instead of using SOA across, we used it per project. So we lost some opportunities there, but we still kept it in a certain part of our business. We also saw a lot of movements in x86, both on Windows and Linux, and we introduced VMware and virtual machines at IKEA in the noughties. Then in the 10s, if that's a word, we started to see movements in our sourcing environment. So we actually did a pretty big move in 2011 to outsource our application development. And we kept operations. And you all know what happens when we do that. We kind of shift to a stare and demand kind of environment. We write requirements, specifications, and then we expect the result back. So this is where the pendulum kind of started swinging in the outsourcing direction. But we also started to see movements in towards cloud. So in 2014, we were pretty early on using one of the big cloud vendors. And then in the late 20s or 10s, where we are at right now, we kind of see big changes in the whole digital journey, especially, moving from project to product. That's one of the big things. And next step is then, okay, what happens next decade? So we are in that shift right now. So I'll walk you through a bit on where we're headed. It's all started with disruption, basically. We've seen that coming for a while now. Both disruption from others in the retail space, from within, and customers kind of demanding another way for us to run our business. And it's basically a change in behaviors. So customers expect us to be with them online, in the phone, and more close, right? Not everyone can drive out to the store. So we started to look at different kind of models on how we can approach the customers in a better way. So from a different kind of angle, so our glasses on, how can we be more modern in that way? For example, looking at city centers, looking at our range, like a Home Smart, which we're having on our booth, for instance. Trådfri is another interesting case with lamps. So this whole digital transformation, we have kind of 4 streams in this. It's about the digital DNA. So the whole mindset coming into this, the culture around it, how we are organized, and how we are driving the digital unit and the whole business, basically. Next step is the digital foundation. How are we going to work? Is that x86s still? Is that IBM mainframes? Or is it modern compute, modern runtime? So that's a big part of it as well. So it's a lot of transformation shifts going on in this bigger transformation. And also, it's about empowering coworkers, giving them the right tools, because they are out meeting the customers, and we need to help them and enable them and create this kind of companion for them to help the customers and serve customers in a better way. So that's also a big thing for us. And meeting the customer in all different channels, wherever they are, that's one of the main themes as well. So I'm going to focus a bit on digital DNA in this talk, because I think that's super important. And in this, we say we're going to change everything, almost, and that includes way of working. So that will take us to the next step in this, because the old ways of working is not really conducive to the new delivery models that we need to use nowadays, like speed to market. How can we achieve a faster speed to market, right? So to set the scene, we have some guiding principles that will actually infuse us, and they are connected to our common values at IKEA. So it's all about accountability. That's super important, coming from the old into the new. To be accountable of what we do or fail to do. It's about having the customer at heart in everything we do, in whatever solutions we create and think about. It's about empathizing with the customer. Is this a good thing? So in this instance, it will help with the more innovative methods like lean methodologies, lean startup. We can work with MVPs to validate hypotheses, and that's always about having the customer in mind, right? We create personas and we try to emphasize. Innovation, entrepreneurship is a strong it has a strong presence at IKEA and has always been that way. Ever from the warehouses to the stores to the central digital department, right? The entrepreneurship is strong. We want to be informed by data. We want to not create a lot of decisions based on gut stomach feeling. You know, we want to base it on facts, and data is very valuable for us. So we try to move around a bit on how we base our suggestions and decisions based on data. Action-oriented is more of like, we have grit. We're from Småland, right? You know, Gnosjöandan, Älmhultsandan, we have grit, we have the willpower to move forward and to help. And along with the digital mindset, the scene that we want to set, is also about organization. So this illustrates our product organization. So we're working according to a business capability area, and a capability area describes what the business does. Doesn't necessarily describe how and when or who is doing it, but what. It's long-lived. So for us in retail, you know, our sales and payments kind of systems and landscape is super important. So that's a business capability area, for instance. These chapters is where we have our engineers working. So some of my engineers are working in the one of the chapter sales that goes across, supporting all product teams in the organization. So a direct line to someone like me, as a chapter lead, but the dotted line then to the products out there. But in order to really succeed with a digital transformation, you need to adopt a new way of working, a new kind of thinking, and it's actually about Devops. So that's the main part of my presentation here. How can we adopt it? So DevOps is kind of hard to define. There's so many definitions out there. There's really not one definition. This is a kind of a good beginning or base for it. So it's a cultural combination of cultural mindset, practices, and tools. So tools is not number one in this order, right? But basically, DevOps is defined by the outcomes it produces. It's not something we do. It's not a noun. It's not something that we download and just implement. So it goes across from leadership support and grassroots movements from engineers and how we adopt it. And there's a lot of practices contributing to this whole DevOps sphere. And we can kind of arrange them and set them in a context. Absolutely at IKEA, we have something strong for us, and it's about togetherness. It's about working together. And in a DevOps context, and you know DevOps is all about collaboration. That's it. It's a very easy concept, but it's so hard to define. But it's all about collaboration, having the right competence in the same place and working together. So on a team level, it's all about having this shared responsibility, and that you can work with the operability aspects, quality, security, software delivery from within the team. So if we assemble competencies needed, and we share the objective and the outcome, then we can say that we have a kind of a good culture for the team. But it also has to be supported for the whole organization. It's all about the organization supporting autonomous teams. We move into a product-oriented setup, and that's super important because then you scale down. So you work with smaller digital products. You work with iterations. So you know, smaller products, smaller problems. So in that same kind of thinking, we want to move away from the bigger monoliths from the past to smaller kind of a microservice setup without sprawling with microservices. Another way to visualize this, and this is just an example, is that we want to support the generative culture, that, you know, the servant kind of leadership. So I want to flip the traditional org chart. So we want to support the teams. We want to set them up for success. So the teams are the important piece in this. That's a fundament, not management layers or anything like that, or reporting lines. It's actually the teams and the engineers. That's the important piece. So working together and doing things that last. That's one important piece of this kind of puzzle. The next thing is about getting things done. And do things fast. Fail fast. That's a good thing. I usually talk about no plumbing. And plumbing is all the unnecessary stuff, right? The cognitive overload. If I have a product and an objective in mind, I don't want to fiddle with the infrastructure and the network and setup before I even can start testing and validating my idea, right? I want to use high-level services. And this leads to kind of more of a virtualized cloud model, of course. That's one of the main prerequisites for adopting Devops. Another thing is that we don't want to do agile. We want to be agile. And there's a big difference in this. We don't want to implement the framework, follow the ceremonies, and just do it, right? We want to be agile in the agile true sense, that we want to work on iterations. We want to be fast with feedback loops. We want to act on it, course correct when needed. So that's about being agile. We want to remove waste as much as possible, right? So toil reduction within Devops is big, right? We want to automate away all the mundane, mandatory, repetitive tasks, basically. So remove what's not important. We want to have lightweight change processes, and we've seen this, but previously, 50 years coming to this point, we've been very strong on processes, on how to do stuff, having a lot of toll gates in between. But that's actually not supporting the outcome and the objective, right? We want to get things out there to our customers. We want to try and test and see what works and what doesn't. So the change process to actually get something out in production should be minimal and short. We want to decouple and remove a lot of the dependencies. We want to have self-sufficient teams that can run their own full stack, basically. And this also supports the cloud model, right? So you want to ideate, build, and run within the team. We don't want to have others to do it for us. Because if we do, we lose out on that knowledge or that kind of way of adjusting and controlling, right? So we want to decouple, and this goes back to architecture. We want to have a decoupled architecture. Automate, automate, automate. That's super important going into this, the whole automation mindset, right? If I can, I will. Because automation is binary, right? If it's wrong, or it's right. And if it's wrong, we can kind of fix it and work with it in code. Because we're all developers, right? So that's easy for us to work with. And we want to have WIP limits, because we all know we all are overloaded with stuff to do. But if we limit it to a couple at a time and follow the kind of lean methodologies in that sense, we can gain speed. And adopt cloud nativeness. So I don't want to talk, and I don't want to do just a lift and shift to cloud. I actually want us to optimize for cloud using high-level services instead of just lifting one VM to another VM, because that's the first step maybe, but absolutely not a cloud-native solution. So it's about getting things done and get speeding things. The third thing I want to talk about is to finding better ways and do things better. And that's all about continuous improvements. And there are some methods to this that we use. One thing is also from Lean, value stream mapping. So if we have organize ourselves according to value streams, right? Or if we have products that follows a certain theme, we can do this kind of mapping and see what's waste or what's actually contributing to our objective. And that's super important to get and finding a more optimized flow and path to production. Design thinking is one thing that's going to help us with emphasizing with the customer, testing and learning and exploring new things. Minimal, viable everything, right? Don't do big designs up front. Don't do old traditional pedestal architecture and blueprints. You want to start minimal and iterate on top of it. The feedback loops are super important, both with machines and between us humans, right? So the feedback loops are super important to have built in and to constantly learn and course correct if we're wrong, right? And iteration. It all again goes back to the agile way of working. Iterate and work with smaller workable items, small batches of work, smaller batches, smaller problems. This piece is also connected to how we want to work and how we want to lead and how our leadership should look like. But going back to the teams, it's all about how are we adopting DevOps in a good way? How can we follow it up and how can we work with a certain amount of metrics? So have you all read the book Accelerate? Hands up. A couple. I know that Jess is here tomorrow. So that's really good. In Accelerate, they kind of did research and found out 4 really, really good metrics to measure the performance of the teams. So it's all about the speed, the velocity, the throughput of something. And here we have deployment frequency. How often do we deploy in production? And deployment lead time. How long does it take from you to commit your code and all the way out to production? So we want to make that as short as possible, of course. And the stability factor. So time to restore service goes back to quality. How long does it take to fix a broken IKEA.se? Does it take 2 days? That's a really bad thing. Does it take 20 minutes? Okay, that's much, much better. So we want to measure it and follow it up in a good way. And change failure rate is, how when we deploy, how often does it break? And preferably then we will try to roll forward and fix it with patches instead of rolling back. And that's also part of this mentality. And also the big shift from previously when we did the big rollbacks. And you can kind of measure this, or you can measure this in a good way. So this is coming from State of DevOps. Have you all read the report from Dora Institute? I advise you to read it. It's coming from Google nowadays. And they have laid this out, and they talked to a lot of teams and how we can divide them in elite, high, medium, and low performers, and how often, where you are in these kind of metrics. For us, in some cases, we're very low performing. In some cases, we're actually pretty good. So we aim for having a high-performing teams across, and that will require a lot of work in this digital DNA kind of setup. And all these 4 pieces of the puzzle actually sums up and is the essence of our values at IKEA. So very strong value foundation at IKEA, and so all these 4 maps very well into the DevOps mindset. So it's not something that's in opposite or of what we do. It's very much in line, and I think all these 4 is critical to have one way or another working with in digital. So digital DNA is all about the cultural mindset and the guiding principles and the practices and how we organize and how we work with our products. But then we also have the digital foundation. And I think that's the tech piece. And sometimes it's easier to manage tech. It's about compute, it's about runtime. It's about having the available services for me to build my stuff. So we are all about this multi-cloud, and that's a necessity for us because we're a global company. We have presence both here in Western Hemisphere, of course, but also in Asia, where we have different kind of requirements. So we need to use a lot of different cloud vendors and compute offerings. So, of course, on-premise, up in Älmhult and Usby, but also in the cloud, different vendors. So for us coming in here, we've seen a lot of the development now is going on using 3 main areas. So it's JVM with Spring, of course. We see a lot of Node.js and JavaScript. We also see more of Go coming up, especially in the infrastructure space, but also in business logic. We want to use more of the higher level services, going back to no plumbing. So we want to use a lot of the functions, a function as service, serverless. That's what we want to use to get a fast feedback loop and test it out. But we also, going down to platform as a service. We don't want to manage and do a lot of plumbing with infrastructure. It has its use, but it's not really in line with our objective and the product. And to help us with this, the engineering piece, we've developed a model, a Devops model, that we want to follow. So if you recall this infinity symbol, but I put it in a context of continuous improvements, because it's all about lean. And it's all about having some objectives in each and every box, and to follow them. So the maturity is also based on what you do in each and every box, to fulfill the 4 metrics in a good way. So I'll probably remember or recall most of them. One interesting piece is coming from the old to the new, is the difference between deploy and release. Do you all know the difference between deploy and release? Yes, I guess you do, right? You can deploy constantly. There's no problem in deploying things. But release is a business decision. You flag it or you unflag it, right? They make it accessible and available to end users. But the deployment should preferably be part of your continuous delivery, your software delivery aspects of what you do. But release is something else. So previously we've been bundling those together. We have been doing big launches, having war rooms, sitting together, 24-hour big bang cutovers. But if we kind of minimize the work and we deploy already, the code is out there, we just, okay, now it's released. And that will help us to separate. And I encourage everyone to work in this space to separate them completely. Right? We also have the monitoring, support, and fix. And fix is included in this because we believe in transparency. We believe in having an open atmosphere where we document in the open, we code in the open, and make it transparent. So the inner source model, open source within company walls, right? We want to have our code open in a common place that everyone can browse and see. And if I know Kotlin, and I know this team has a problem with Kotlin, I can contribute and help out, right? That's all about this culture of togetherness and how we can improve as an organization. So to kind of end this in a nice way, I have a pretty good quote actually coming from the 70s from our founder, Ingvar. And I think he sets the scene in a really good way because it's all about continuous improvements. What can we do better tomorrow? I'll let you read it. I hope you haven't missed our booth downstairs. We actually have some pretty cool coding challenges and prizes. So maybe you've seen our Home Smart range. We have Symfonisk now, we have our lamps, and we have our bookshelves. That's actually the prizes. Today is a Java challenge, and we'll do some JavaScript. And where did you go? Python on Friday. So you're welcome to join us and talk to us downstairs about IKEA and about our tech or digital or DevOps in general. Thank you.